says, boys not men, boys not men. They're boys. And they don't get to be boys because they're untouchable. So we're looking at young men growing up in an environment becoming hyper-masculine, trying to figure out a way to gain respect in a world that does not respect them, in a world that is afraid of them, in a world that pushes back from them, in a world that won't touch them. And similarly, young females who are trying very desperately to figure out how to navigate, and then begin to look at the images on television, the images of telling them who they are and what they are. And these are consistent.
Be specific.
I.e., let's go all the way back to the minstrel shows. It hasn't changed much. Women are the over-sexualized, objectified. Males are the over-sexed, violent, criminal, gangster, all of the things. Case in point, there's a gentleman I know who's a spoken word artist, and we have a lot of very positive hip-hop going on. There's a lot of positive hip-hop, but you don't hear about that. He talked about a record they made that was called Black Power, a song. It was called Black Power. When he presented that to the music execs, they said, oh, no, you can't put that on there. You cannot put, no, absolutely not. So it got renamed Crack Music. Didn't change a word, but changed the title, Crack Music. And they said, oh, that'll be okay. So we got to remember what is being promoted.
Why don't we stick a pin on that? Why don't we just take a break now, and then we'll continue. We'll be right back.
And dangerous marrying of hip-hop with pornography. Watch that one. So we're looking at a society, because all you have to do is do the math. If you can look at Uncut or any of these other after midnight shows, imagine what pornography has to do to sell over the top of that. And you're looking at a level of dehumanization and violence that we've never seen before. So I think there's a lot happening in urban America, not to mention the fact that you have people who are, quote unquote, on reservations. We're supposed to be desegregated, but we know that didn't happen. You can go to every major urban setting in America, even with gentrification, and you know where all black folks are. And they are on that reservation, modeling the same behavior on that reservation, generation after generation.
Let me ask you this. Did the Katrina tragedy enhance your thesis that you had been...
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
In what way?
In this way, that part of what, the work that I talk about, and again, Gil, it's no news that in order to look at healing on any level, psychologically or physically, you look at history. You go to the doctor right now for anything, he's going to ask you your history, your mama's history, your daddy's history. It's not a new phenomenon either to look at history. And all I wanted to do was look at patterns of behavior. I wanted to understand what I was looking at. What did we learn, and what did we fold into what we believe is cultural norm? And, it's called, a friend of mine calls it the poison in the cookies. See, we got poison in the cookies. So we got to tease out the poison. But what I saw that was consistent with Katrina was that historically, what people have done, namely those in power, and in this case Europeans, to reconcile the inconsistency with deeming themselves to be superior and civilized. How does one reconcile believing that, saying that, promoting this morally superior being or group of people, and yet engaging in behavior that is barbaric? Hence, raping, mutilating, slaughtering, selling, breeding other human beings. How does one reconcile that? Very simply, you have to justify the behavior. How do you justify the behavior? By relabeling the people to fit your behavior towards them. Simple. Now, let me give you Katrina. Huge, giant flood. Terrible hurricane stuff. Everybody's upset. Covers get pulled back. We see a whole lot of black people, and so does the rest of the world. And the rest of the world said, oh, shame on you, America. Figuratively and literally, shame on you. So then, immediately, what does the media do? Because people are feeling right now that dissonance, the disconnect, that the inability to reconcile what they were seeing with what they believed we were as a country. That's called cognitive dissonance. So they were trying to figure out, how do we remove it? Oh, my God. So the first thing they did was they started to say, well, I don't know, do you think it's class, or do you think it's race? What do you think, Frank? They started to intellectualize it. Distraction. Meanwhile, babies are dying. But America's engaging in a dialogue, whether it's class or race. Who cares what it is? You see, because I'm trying to remove the dissonance, to distract people from the obvious. So then when that didn't work, they started to figure out the witch hunt. Who did it? Who's responsible? Is it that mayor? Who is it? Is it the governor? Who do we need to get? Who do we have to go after? Once again, another distraction. Babies are dying. And all we're seeing is armed guards circling these people who are suffering. And the most important piece, when they couldn't do it any longer, they said, but aren't they just looters and rapists? Didn't they zero right in and go, so therefore, you see, they're bad people, and they therefore deserve it. Then they have a block out, and everybody can go to sleep and say they deserve what happened to them.
Dr. Leary, you went to New Orleans, right?
I did. My family's
recently.
from...
Give me a snapshot of what you saw.
I think the first thing that I experienced was, going into the Ninth Ward and seeing what looked like a battlefield, the ruins. I mean, I was walking through ruins. What was most, what you first do is the smell is what gets you first. It's just a smell, for me, because everything died. You have to understand. It was human beings that died, but dogs died, cats died, rats died, everything died. And so there is this palpable, almost, this smell of death. And with that is sewage and everything else. It's dried now and hardened. You see the watermarks. You see the numbers written of those found dead or alive, and these sorts of things written on the sides of buildings. And interestingly enough, there was a church, and inside the church all the pews had come together, actually into a pile, and the only thing that remained on the wall was, he walketh beside the still waters. That was the only thing on the wall, which was kind of an eerie reality.
Did you talk to any grassroots?
Of course. I spoke with one woman who was just amazing. She was a nurse who would go in, in-home nurse, black woman who was walking me through and pointing out where she would take care of different clients. The house wasn't there. I mean, flattened like a pancake. And I know that there were many more bodies, because based on what I saw, there was no way you could have even gotten to the bodies based on what I saw. She says, yes, I took care of this man in this house and this woman in her own house, which she lost. But she never left. This woman spent, she's an unsung heroine. She did the work. She stayed. She loved her people, and she was there for them. She would have been there for them before. She was there before the flood, and she was there after. And I spoke to young people. A group of us African-American mental health professionals actually addressed many who came to my area of the world and talked to them about their stories. And one gentleman who had come for 3 days on a bus, he traveled 3 days on a bus with his baby and the baby's mother. They were young, early 20s. And 3 days, baby sick, and that I ended up going with him to the hospital to just check any respiratory problems. On that bus were people who were sick, people who were mentally ill, people who were in recovery, people who were elderly. Everyone was on that bus for 3 days. He got to Portland, Oregon. They put him up in a hotel, only briefly. Put him up in a hotel. And he says, of all the things that happened, being on the rooftop, hearing the gurgling sounds of people drowning, and waking up and finding who was left, he said, all the things they didn't tell you, seeing people like pin cushions in the trees, like pin cushions and cushions in the trees. He says, what hurt me most, he said, what hurt me most was when I turned on the television in Portland, Oregon, and I saw that they were sending airplanes to pick up animals, pets. He says it hurt. That's when the tears streamed from his eyes. He says, when I saw that they were sending airplanes to pick up animals, and I carried my baby for 3 days on a bus. He says nothing broke his heart more.